You know what nobody told you about Social Security this year? That the game just changed. And I'm not talking about some minor adjustment to the COLA or a few extra dollars on your monthly check. I'm talking about a fundamental shift that's putting real money back into the pockets of over 3 million Americans who've been penalized for decades simply because they served their communities. The Social Security Fairness Act took effect January 5th, 2025, and if you're a retired teacher, firefighter, police officer, or any public servant who worked a job that didn't pay into Social Security, you need to understand what this means for your bottom line. Because since February 25th, the Social Security Administration has been sending out retroactive payments. We're talking lump sums that cover benefits going all the way back to January 2024. Some folks are seeing checks for over $12,000 deposited into their accounts right now. And monthly benefits? They're jumping by an average of $360 every single month. That's not pocket change when you're living on a fixed income. For 40 years, the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset have been quietly stealing from your Social Security benefits. The government called it fair, but there was nothing fair about punishing you for choosing to serve your community. That ends today. And if you're wondering whether this applies to you or if you're owed money you haven't received yet, you need to understand exactly how this law works and what action you need to take, because the SSA isn't going to hold your hand through this process. Let me break this down for you in plain English, because I've talked to too many people over the years who got absolutely hammered by these provisions and never really understood what was happening to their money. Here's the deal. Back in 1983, Congress passed the windfall elimination provision. Then, in 1977, they had already slipped in something called the government pension offset. And what these two provisions did was reduce or completely eliminate your Social Security benefits if you also received a pension from work where you didn't pay into Social Security. Now stay with me here because this is where it gets infuriating. Let's say you spent 25 years teaching in a public school system in Massachusetts or California or Ohio. You dedicated your life to educating our kids, right? But your state didn't participate in Social Security for teachers. Instead, you paid into a state pension system. Now, maybe before you became a teacher, you worked in the private sector for 10 years. You waited tables, you worked retail, you did whatever you had to do. During those 10 years, you paid Social Security taxes just like everybody else. You earned your 40 quarters, which is what you need to qualify for Social Security benefits. You thought you were set up for retirement with both your teacher pension and a modest Social Security check. But then the windfall elimination provision kicked in and slashed your Social Security benefit, sometimes by $500, $600, even $700 a month. That's not small money when you're on a fixed income. That's groceries. That's medication. That's keeping the heat on in winter. And it gets worse with the government pension offset. This one hits spouses and widows particularly hard. Here's how it worked. Let's say your husband worked his entire career in the private sector paying into Social Security, and you worked as a police officer or a firefighter for a city that had its own pension system instead of Social Security. When your husband passed away, you should have been eligible for survivor benefits from his Social Security record. But the government pension offset took 2/3 of your government pension and used it to reduce or eliminate those survivor benefits. So if you were getting a government pension of $900 a month, they'd reduce your potential Social Security survivor benefit by $600. If your survivor benefit would have been $600 or less, you got nothing. Zero. Even though your husband paid into Social Security his entire working life specifically, so his family would be protected if something happened to him, the government essentially told you that because you chose to serve your community as a first responder, you didn't deserve the survivor benefits your husband earned. Now, the government tried to justify this by saying these provisions prevented people from getting a windfall. They claimed that the Social Security benefit formula is weighted to help lower-wage workers, and since you might have looked like a lower-wage worker on paper because your public service job didn't show up in the Social Security system, you'd get an unfairly high benefit. But here's what they don't tell you. You weren't trying to game the system. You weren't a low-wage worker. You were a dedicated public servant who happened to work in a state or municipality that chose not to participate in Social Security. You didn't make that choice. Your employer did. And yet you were the one who got penalized for it. For 40 years, public employee unions and retirement associations fought to get these provisions repealed. 40 years. They wrote letters, they lobbied Congress, they told their stories, and every time a bill would gain some momentum, it would die in committee or get voted down because of concerns about the cost. And make no mistake, repealing these provisions does cost money. We're talking about roughly $17 billion in retroactive payments alone, plus ongoing increased benefits that will add to Social Security's long-term obligations. But here's my take on it, and I don't care if people disagree with me. These folks earned those benefits. They paid into the system. Their spouses paid into the system. This isn't welfare. This isn't an entitlement in the sense that it's a handout. This is money they earned through decades of work. And if we're going to make promises to people about what they'll receive in retirement, we need to keep those promises. So fast forward to late 2024. The Social Security Fairness Act finally had enough support to pass both the House and the Senate. On January 5, 2025, President Biden signed it into law. And here's what it did. It completely eliminated both the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset. Not reformed them, not adjusted them, eliminated them, gone. Effective retroactively to January 2024. That means if you were receiving reduced benefits because of these provisions, your full benefit amount got restored. And not just going forward. You were owed money for every month since January 2024 that you should have been getting the higher amount. Now, the Social Security Administration projected that processing all these benefit adjustments and retroactive payments would take a year or maybe longer. They've got limited staff, limited resources, and we're talking about recalculating benefits for nearly 3 million people. But here's where the SSA actually surprised everyone in a good way. On February 25, 2025, they announced they'd created an automated system to process the majority of these cases. They started sending out retroactive lump sum payments immediately, and by the end of March, most people who were due retroactive money received it. We're talking about checks covering anywhere from 13 to 15 months of increased benefits depending on exactly when your original benefit started. For some folks, that's $12,000, $15,000, even $20,000 showing up in their bank account or mailbox. By April 2025, monthly benefits were adjusted, and people started seeing their new, higher payment amounts. The average increase is about $360 per month, but that's just an average, and averages don't tell you the whole story. Some people are seeing increases of $50 or $100. Others are getting over $1,000 more every single month. It all depends on your work history, how long you paid into Social Security, what your pension amount is, and what type of benefit you're receiving. If you were completely wiped out by the government pension offset, meaning your survivor benefit was reduced to zero, and now suddenly you're getting $800 or $900 or $1,000 a month that you weren't getting before, that's life-changing money. Let me give you a real-world example to show you how dramatic this can be. Let's say you worked in private sector jobs for 15 years before becoming a teacher. Your Social Security benefit based on those 15 years of covered earnings would have been around $800 a month at full retirement age. But because of the windfall elimination provision, the way Social Security calculated your benefit changed. Instead of using the standard formula, which gives you 90% of the first portion of your average indexed monthly earnings, they dropped it down to as low as 40% for people with fewer years of substantial Social Security earnings. That reduction alone could knock $400, $500, even $600 off your monthly check. So instead of getting $800, you were only getting $300 or $400. Now, with the repeal, you're getting that full $800 every month. That's $400 or $500 back in your pocket, month after month, for the rest of your life. Or take the government pension offset scenario. You're a widow. Your late husband's Social Security record would entitle you to a survivor benefit of $1,000 a month. But you also get a $900 monthly pension from your years working as a county clerk. Under the old GPO rules, they'd take 2/3 of your $900 pension, which is $600, and subtract it from your $1,000 survivor benefit. You'd end up with $400 in Social Security survivor benefits. With the repeal, you now get the full $1,000, plus your $900 pension. That's an extra $600 a month. Over a year, that's $7,200. Over 10 years in retirement, that's $72,000. That kind of money matters. Now, if you're sitting there thinking this doesn't apply to you, let me tell you who this does affect. It's not everybody. About 72% of state and local government employees actually do pay into Social Security, so they were never hit by these provisions in the first place and won't see any change. But if you worked for a state or local government that opted out of Social Security, or if you're a federal employee who was covered under the old civil service retirement system before 1984, or if you worked abroad under a foreign Social Security system, you might be affected. Teachers? That's a big one. Firefighters, police officers, certain postal workers, civil servants in states like California, Texas, Ohio, Illinois, Massachusetts, Louisiana, and about 20 other states that have significant numbers of public employees not covered by Social Security. Here's what you need to do right now, and I'm going to be very specific about this because the Social Security Administration is not going to hold your hand through every step. If you're already receiving Social Security benefits that were reduced by WEP or GPO, the SSA should be handling this automatically. They've been processing these adjustments since February. But you need to verify that your mailing address and your direct deposit information are accurate and up to date in your Social Security account. Go to ssa.gov/myaccount. Log in. Check your information. If it's wrong, fix it immediately. Because if the SSA sends you a check or tries to direct deposit your retroactive payment and the information is wrong, you're going to have a mess on your hands trying to track down that money. If you never applied for Social Security benefits in the first place because you knew the WEP or GPO would reduce them to almost nothing, or if you're a widow or widower who never applied for survivor benefits because the GPO would have wiped them out, you need to apply now. Don't wait. Go to ssa.gov/apply and submit your application. The timing of your application matters because it affects when your benefits begin and how much you'll receive. All the other Social Security rules still apply. If you claim early before your full retirement age, your benefit will still be reduced for early claiming. If you have earnings from work, the earnings test might still affect you, but at least now you won't have this additional penalty from WEP or GPO on top of everything else. And please be aware of scams. Anytime there's a major change in Social Security policy and money starts flowing, the scammers come out of the woodwork. If someone calls you claiming to be from Social Security and asking for your bank account information or your Social Security number over the phone, hang up. The Social Security Administration does not operate that way. They will send you official correspondence through the mail. They might call you if you've been trying to reach them and they're returning your call, but they're not going to ask you for sensitive information out of the blue. If you're unsure, call the main Social Security number yourself at 1-800-772-1213. Don't call back a number that someone leaves you in a voicemail. Use the official number. One more critical thing. If you were affected by these provisions and you've already passed away, your family might be entitled to claim retroactive benefits on your behalf. There's a specific form, the SSA 1724F4, called Claim for Amounts Due in the case of a deceased beneficiary. Your spouse, your children, or your estate representative can file this to claim any money you were owed but didn't receive before you passed. Don't let that money just sit there unclaimed. Now, I want to address the elephant in the room. Social Security is already facing long-term funding challenges. The trust fund is projected to be depleted by the early 2030s if Congress doesn't make changes. And this repeal of WEP and GPO is going to accelerate that timeline slightly. It's not the main driver of Social Security's problems, not even close, but it does add to the financial strain. Some people argue that we can't afford to eliminate these provisions, that we need every dollar to keep Social Security solvent for future generations. I understand that concern. I really do. But here's my perspective. We're talking about people who worked their entire lives, who contributed to their communities, who played by the rules, and who were penalized because of decisions their employers made decades ago. These are real people with real bills and real needs. If we're going to fix Social Security's long-term problems, and we absolutely must, we need to do it honestly and fairly. We need to look at things like raising the cap on taxable earnings, adjusting the retirement age gradually for younger workers, means testing benefits for high-income retirees, or finding other solutions. But we shouldn't balance the budget on the backs of teachers and firefighters and police officers who've already been shortchanged for 40 years. This repeal is a victory. It's a win for fairness, for common sense, and for treating public servants with the respect and dignity they deserve. If you're one of the 3 million people affected by this change, check your accounts, verify your information, and make sure you're getting every dollar you've earned. And if you know someone who might be affected, a retired teacher, a former police officer, a widow of a firefighter, tell them about this. Share this information. Because there are people out there who don't even know they're entitled to this money. And that's a tragedy.